don't be divisive. That's not the Stoic way. The Stoic way isn't to be divisive. And it is most certainly to accept whoever gets in office, have a bit of humility in the fact that you might not know better, even though you think you do. Today is October 31st, 2024. That's the day I'm recording it, not the day you're listening to it. The day you're listening to it would be the 12th, I believe, if my math is right. 12th of November. And it would have been about a week since the election, the US election. So I'm recording this prior to us knowing the results of the US election. Of course, I'm Canadian, as many Americans would probably know because of my slight accent. But of course, we follow US elections and we follow the US economy, us Canadians. And I thought it might be a good time to just talk a little bit about political division. This podcast is 3.5 years old, I believe, going on 4. Maybe it is 4 at this point. But point being that it's about an election cycle. It's about 4 years. And the Stoics were quite political in the sense of the word that we might not think today. They thought that we should all be political, meaning we should all engage pro-socially with the world, with the country, and our community. But they might not be political in the way that we think about it today. In fact, the word political, it seems to mean something like fake, not real, not genuine. When you talk about, for example, politics in the workplace, you're normally talking about things that people are doing to kind of nudge their way towards power, to make other people look bad, to not be completely genuine. So the Stoics say be political, but they mean it more in the sense of be pro-social, like engage in your community, give a shit about your country, and be patriotic in some sense of the word, but not in the pure sense of the word, because they also say that we're citizens of the universe and of the world before we are citizens of our individual community or our country, that we have to look at ourselves as human beings. So there's a couple things I want to touch on because this election, like all elections, they're all divided, right? They're all divisive. It was always like that. This election, meaning the one we currently go through, it's always going to be the most divisive. I mean, I think back about the few elections, well, more than a few, I guess, that I have witnessed in my life, and it's always that way. It's always this election is the most divisive. And of course it is, because you're voting between two parties. Of course it's going to be divisive. Of course the election times are the times where people start talking about differences. But I want to touch on a few things here. And the first is that this whole thing about political division is very against what the Stoics would suggest. Right? Now, of course, they deem some things good and some things bad, but it's all about individual character. And so as a society, yes, of course, there are just things and unjust things, but they really prioritized what you can do for yourself, like individually, how you can develop, where you can emphasize virtue, how you can be a just individual. And so the whole left versus right thing, it's not really a Stoic thing. And the other thing I'll point out, which is a very interesting point, is that you could have a Stoic on both sides of the political debate. For the most part, I'm not saying that, Stoics would believe in, or let's say someone on the left or someone on the right would have a belief that that is not Stoic. Of course they could. But just that general idea that you could have a conservative Stoic and you could have a liberal Stoic, of course you could. Of course you could. Because at the end of the day, they're obviously conservative and liberal, those two sides of the spectrum, they have different ideas and different ideologies, but they can all fundamentally agree on the Stoic principles, and that is seeking truth. And it also depends, of course, on the context of one's life. So depending on which country you're born in and your genetics and what your family is involved in and what your experiences are in life, you can be a Stoic and be a conservative, and you can be a Stoic and be a liberal. And so the whole division thing is not really a Stoic thing. We could say perhaps that someone today that is left leaning or that is right leaning, maybe we could make the argument that based on what being on the left and being on the right means at this point in time, we could say one is more stoic than the other, but that would also be a very hard argument. Again, because there's so much variation in political beliefs, just because someone is on the left doesn't necessarily mean that they believe everything on the left. So they probably have some right views and whatnot. But I want to really touch on it's going to be too late for some of you, of course, but in terms of selecting a political party to vote for, there's different ways of going about that, right? I think people tend to get hung up on individual issues, so they might get hung up on one particular thing that they're very passionate about. You know, it's it's a hard case to make that you should do that because it's a very one-sided opinion on something. It's a very unilateral decision. What you should do is you should look at all sides of what someone is proposing in terms of, their strategy and their plan. And you should say, okay, well, maybe there's 10 issues here that I'm considering. Candidate A is agreeing with me on six, or I'm agreeing with them on six of those. And candidate B is in agreement on, I don't know, maybe four, maybe three, maybe two, maybe none. And so you might say, okay, it makes more sense for me just based on that math to vote for someone who agrees on more issues than I do. And that's all well and good. So that's not a bad strategy. I've heard that recently in some people that are talking about voting in the elections. What I would say is that it's not as simple as that. And the reason is because this gets really stoic. Politicians have different levels of character. And it's no secret that a lot of the promises politicians make on either side of the spectrum, they all seem to make promises that they never end up being able to hold. And that could be for various reasons. That could be because, they don't have as much power as they think they will have when they get in. There could just be a time issue in the matter of just managing. You only have so much time throughout a day and throughout a 4-year presidential cycle for you to really do the things that you want to do. And so you end up prioritizing certain things. And I can tell you, as someone who is a manager in a company, and I have a long, long, long list of things, an infinite list of things that I could be working on. There's always going to be things that are missed, and you're always going to have things that you wish you could have done and would have done, but you did not get to it because of whatever reason. The days tend to get away from you, and at the end of the day, when you go into any leadership role, period, including a presidential position, you only have so much time. You have your long list of stuff you want to do. But at the end of the day, you got to prioritize what's important and get it done. And 4 years goes by in the blink of an eye for I'm sure they do for presidents. So, but that's kind of the main point, is that when we're looking at a presidential candidate, we want to look at like what they're proposing, their values are, but you want to take a real hard look at their character and whether or not you believe them. And this is where a lot of the issues come today, and the divisiveness, I think, in our current political system, is people are starting to question the truth. People are starting to question the claims that the left are making, that the right are making. And the crazy thing about the internet right now and AI is that you can find a supporting view, you can find supporting evidence for many different viewpoints, even opposing viewpoints. You can find some evidence. You can point to something that says, well, this is that because of this. And you can say, look at this. And someone else can say, well, actually, I have some other evidence that contradicts that. And so this whole idea of like, what is true? What should we believe in? What is false? Where is someone lying to me? Where is someone just being misled? There's a big misinformation thing. Figuring out what the actual facts are is hard enough as it is in this climate. And then you stack on the fact that you have candidates that are making promises based on what they think people want to hear so they can get in, and then they can do what they quote, quote, know is right. The point being is that character means a whole lot when it comes to a presidential candidate, because any leadership position, because you want someone that's going to be genuine, and you want someone that's going to be telling the truth. You want someone that is really good intention. And that's the Stoic proposition, is intentions are absolutely everything. And so it's no different with the presidential campaign. Hey there. Let me thank you for being a listener to this ad-free podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, there are a few things you can do to help me out. A 5-star review on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this really does help, and it's free. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter or Patreon. Substack free gets each episode emailed to you along with the transcripts in the form of an article. You'll also get access to my live talks, followed by a Q&A afterward. Substack Premium supporters and my patrons on Patreon get access to the recordings and a brief article of those Q&A sessions, access to full episodes of the Paradoxically Speaking podcast, my Steps to Success interview series, Stoic meditations, and much more. Links to Substack and Patreon can be found in the show notes. Now, how do you gauge that practically? That's a really hard thing. In fact, it's almost near impossible to do when you're looking at someone through the screen because, well, of course, you're not in front of someone. Like, have you ever seen someone on a video? Maybe someone shows you one of their friends on video, or you see someone's picture, and then you meet them in person, and there's a weird thing that happens where you start to realize that the image you had of that person in your head is not exactly true. And it's misleading because when you see someone, like, we all have an idea of who a politician is in our heads, and then when we actually get the chance, if we ever get the chance to sit down in front of them and talk with them, we realize that, okay, there's something that I had wrong. And unfortunately for us, the chances of us getting in front face to face with a politician that we're going to vote for is very unlikely. And so we never really get that chance to have that clarity on who someone is. All that to say, character is a very important consideration, but it's very hard to gauge. It's very hard to read someone when you're looking at them through a screen all the time. And you can only really weigh someone's political leanings and opinions and what they say they're going to do based on how much you actually trust them, and that's a really hard thing to do. And so that's basically one of the main points I wanted to make is that as a Stoic, you're looking at people's character and you're trying to select someone for that, but have a bit of humility in the fact that you're not really going to know. You're never really going to know someone's true character looking at them through a screen, but you can gauge a little bit based on their historical performance. And this gets brought up a lot in political debates, right? What the other party lied about and what they didn't lie about, and so on. And it becomes a finger pointing game, which obviously is not very good. But character is a huge thing when you're voting for someone. Now, I probably should have started with this, but I got into the politics a little bit there discussing that. But it's 100% your obligation as a Stoic, I think, in my opinion, to vote. I 100% think. I don't think you can be a Stoic and say, well, I'm not going to vote. I don't really care. At the end of the day, you have to appreciate and understand and have respect for the fact that politicians do affect our lives as Canadians, as Americans, and in the world, as citizens of the world. And so it is your responsibility to do your research and vote for someone. Now, the research part is important because if you're just going to go and vote for someone, that's not really a good thing either, because you're just going to sway the election based on luck as opposed to anything informed. No. Your obligation as a citizen of a country is for you to study the candidates, make an educated choice on who you're going to vote for, and then actually go and vote. And again, even though the Stoics say get involved in politics, they don't exactly mean what that is today. I think it is your responsibility, your obligation to vote, period, and to make sure that you're making the right decision when you vote. Now, the last thing I wanted to touch on here, because now we're at the point where someone has been elected. When this episode comes out, someone is going to be in office. I don't know who. Nobody does. But we will when you're hearing this. How do you receive that? How do you receive that? This is a very important question because what often happens is political winning is always somewhere around 50%. It's never like 5% and 95%. It's never. It's always like 52, 55% in favor. And so by nature, most presidents that get in they have the support of about half the people, more or less, right? Of course, probably more, but depending on, again, how the people are voting, they can sometimes they win the popular vote, but they lose the election, and vice versa. All that to say, how can we really receive that information? It's human nature for us to wish for the person we didn't vote for to fail. That's human nature. It's human nature for us to say, I wanted this person to get in and they did not get in, therefore I want the other person to fail. That is a mistake. That is a massive mistake. If you are a patriot, if you love your country, if you want the best for your country, you have to root for whoever gets in office. Now, I'm going to assume that the election's not rigged, and I'm going to assume that the result is actually a genuine one. I don't want to debate that at all. I don't want to get into that at all. Let's assume for the moment that we can trust the election results. Whoever gets into office, you should be hoping for a successful term. Now, that does not mean that you have to agree with them on everything. That doesn't mean you have to agree on all their decisions. But what it means is that you have to have the humility to look at someone that just got in office and you have to say, okay, this person was elected by the country that I am in. I voted in the opposite direction, but most people disagree with me. Most people are in agreement with this presidential candidate. Maybe, just maybe, they are right. Just maybe they are going to make good policy decisions that I might not think is right. And just maybe that's going to be a good thing for the country. For me, even. I think we fall into danger when we start wishing for other people to fail. Just as a general idea, you should never want someone else to fail. You should want people to succeed. That doesn't mean you desire someone that's evil to succeed. No. Because again, we're talking about success in the sense of the Stoic mindset. Okay? So in Stoicism, I don't have to define what success is for you as a Stoic, but that's how we're evaluating people. So gauge people's character, vote appropriately, do your own research. Don't be divisive. That's not the Stoic way. The Stoic way isn't to be divisive. And it is most certainly to accept whoever gets in office. Have a bit of humility in the fact that you might not know better, even though you think you do. And stand back and watch and root for someone to be successful. No, you don't have to agree with everything. You probably don't agree with 100% of everything with anyone else in the world. That's what makes you an individual. That's what makes you a genuine person. That's what makes you a member of the cosmos. The fact that you have your own opinion and opinions on everything. Don't go for 100% coverage. Do your best. Vote appropriately. But at the end of the day, you should be rooting for the success of your country and not its failure.